So this isn't a story. This isn't a Hollywood drama. This isn't a bedtime story or a story to beat your neighbor who is a homosexual or transgender over the head with because you want him to know of the impending calamity and judgment for his behavior. It is a record of God's faithfulness. It's a record of God's holiness. It's a record of God's mercy. It's a record that what God has promised, He will also perform. And it's also a record that even in judgment, God is still merciful and is doing all that He can to pull you out. And it's also a promise that if you say, no, thank you, I think I can do better. Or hold on just a minute and let me look back, that you'll suffer consequences and it will be on your own head, not His. So this is the man of God at large, and we're at Lot's bed and breakfast. We're going to see how the choices that he has made, how the choices that his family has made are going to play out. And they have implications that not only affect them, they affect the entire community around them, and they affect an entire nation of people for thousands of years going into the future. See, the decisions that you make today have far-reaching ramifications, things that you could never even possibly imagine, not just for your kids, but for your kids' kids, for your kids' kids' kids, for people that you've never even met. And that's both good and bad. See, what you do matters. How you live matters. The decisions that you make today, they matter, not just for you, but for everyone else. And you'll see it here in the actions that Lot takes and how this is going to play out. So we're in Genesis 19. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. So Uncle Abraham had taught him very well. When he had company coming, he bows himself in a show of respect, and he lets them know that he is aware of their presence, that he values them for being there. And so he said, "Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early and go on your ways." And they said, "No, but we will abide in the street all night." These are tough old boys. I can't imagine having to sleep in the street all night. But Lot wouldn't have it. He says, "Look, you come in here," and he calls himself, "I am your servant. I am here at your disposal. I'll give you everything that you need." So he's a generous individual. He's a kind-hearted individual. That's important, because when you see people do things that are stupid, when you've done something stupid, and you have, I know that you have even without meeting you, or you see people do things that are questionable, especially when it comes to morality, it's sometimes hard to remember that they have good qualities, that they're people just like me and just like you. But when you really look at all of the aspects of an individual, it puts a human face, a human spin on something where otherwise they're just a character in some sort of drama that's playing out. Lot's a good person. He's a generous person. He's a respectful person who is willing to help, willing to extend himself for a complete and total stranger. So it's knowing that, and the decisions that he makes through the rest of this story, is so difficult for me, just like it will be for you, to bring those two together and find some sort of congruity where we can agree on it. Now in verse 3, "And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat." So he's not only given them a place to stay, he's fed them, he's prepared food for them, he's given them the best that he has to offer. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter, both old and young. That means the old men that you would normally avoid, getting to the other side of the street, the creepers, The people that they're on the registry, I guarantee it. The people that you would take your children and shield them from because you don't even want to see that men like that exist in the world. Those men are there. And then your average everyday man, the father, the grandfather, the uncle, the people that you would see at the store that you instantly trust because you see the warmth and the camaraderie in their eyes. And then the young boys that are there. Everyone. That shows you that the sin of Sodom had permeated all strata of life. That it wasn't just relegated to one people group. It wasn't just relegated to one age demographic. It was everybody. See, sin spreads, and it spreads like a cancer. It spreads like weeds and vines that would get all over your garden and all over the things that you have growing outside until it covers everything, where you can't get away from it. You can't get it off of you because it's so pervasive that it takes everything. It takes the nutrients from everything else until it completely takes over. And that's true for any sin in your life, whatever it is. Some of the big things, the things that we think really matter, the things that might get us a little time in prison, like drug addiction, alcohol, drinking and driving, selling drugs, murder, those things are great sins. But there are other sins that are just as pervasive and just as destructive. They just happen to be more socially acceptable, like sexual immorality. That's sleeping around, so you don't have to look that word up. Or engaging in that sort of behavior, that's perfectly and totally socially accepted in all parts of the world today. All different economic areas of our country accepts that sort of behavior. Most churches accept that behavior. It used to be that when you would go to church, there was at least a standard. Well, you may not keep that standard, but you have a standard and an expectation of holiness and behavior. And friends, most of the time in most of the places, that standard is gone. They're just glad that you're there. They're just glad that you're willing to pay a little money, listen to some songs, participate in a TED Talk, go to the house, and you can get there before the meatloaf even gets cold. That is what is commonly accepted in our country today and around the world today. Because it is so accepted. The reason that it's so accepted is because little by little, decision by decision, compromise by compromise, we have accepted the unacceptable to where now that is the new normal. And it doesn't take long. It only takes about one generation. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And what are you training your kids to be? What did the men in Sodom train up the young men that were coming behind them to be? Perverts, rapists, murderers, those of absolutely no moral fabric, no sort of morality whatsoever. They were trained to be that way. And had they continued on for another generation or two generations, their children would have been the exact same or worse. See, your behavior matters not just because of how it affects you or how you live or what consequences that you have to endure. It matters because everyone that is coming up behind you, your children, your grandchildren, they are looking to you. They are watching you, your behavior, the way that you speak, the way that you treat other people. They think that that is how they are supposed to live. Now, you can tell them differently. You can give them a book. Now that we are so sophisticated, so educated, and have such technology at our fingertips, you'll send them a video. You'll give them an app that can show them how they're supposed to live and how they're supposed to conduct themselves. But I hate to tell you, they're not going to read it. They're not going to watch it. And if they do, they're just doing it to placate you. The way that our kids are going to act is how you act. Your kids are going to behave the way that they see you behave. Not the way that you present yourself for the pastor and everyone else, but the person that you are behind closed doors. Your behavior matters. It matters for everyone in proximity to you, and it will affect everyone throughout your entire life. Genesis 19:5. And when they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us that we may know them. They weren't interested in getting to know these men first and last name on that sort of basis. The language means that they are saying, bring these men out that we can molest them, that we can rape them, that we can know them. When the Bible uses the word know, that's what it's talking about, knowing every possible intimacy with another human being. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him and said, I pray ye, brethren, do not so wickedly. So if you could see him, he's busting out of the door like this, and he shuts it real tight behind him, comes in, because he doesn't want them to get in. He is afraid that if he steps away from this door, that they are going to push back him and by force take these men out and molest them right in the open street. You may have been to a part of the country or another country that is dangerous at that level, but probably not. I've been to some dangerous places in my time, but I have never been to a place where I thought that someone was going to snatch me up and molest me. I know that people have had that happen to them, but thankfully there are most places that were safe from that sort of danger. But can you imagine? Can you put yourself there? Can you possibly conceive of such a sin-filled environment that has permeated everything, that you have to barricade yourself behind locked doors, that you have to protect strangers that come into your home because they're being threatened by the people that are there? That's what he's having to deal with. And why is he having to deal with it? Well, because he made a very poor choice in his choice of real estate, because he was somewhere that he ought not be. And why was he there? Because someone that wasn't supposed to bring him did. Now, that's not to say that these things happen and consequences pile up and you're just on your own. When we do dumb things, when we do things contrary to the commands of God, when we do things that are contrary to the law of God, we will suffer consequences. But even in those consequences, God is still merciful and still makes a beautiful tapestry out of the mess that we have created. There's a scripture that says that all things work together for good to them who love God and to them who are the called according to his purpose. That's an important addendum. If you love God and you're called according to his purpose, then friend, God's working it out for your good. Even though it may not be good, God's working it out for your good. But if you don't love God and you're not called according to his purpose, it's not working out for your good. It's just working you at that point. It's an important detail to know not just where you're at, what's going on, but to who you actually belong. See, the child of God, the believer, those that are filled with his spirits, I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you this or not, but we still do dumb things. We still do selfish things. We still do self-centered things, and we still do things that are contrary to what we know that we ought to be doing. But in that, God is still merciful because we belong to him and we return to him. And we continually go back and seek him, even in our disobedience and our ignorance. If you don't have that, then the best that you have is putting out fires constantly to try to alleviate your suffering and your consequences. In verse 8, he says, Behold now, I have 2 daughters. So he's going to bargain with them. I have 2 daughters which have not known man. So let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you. And do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. You heard that correctly. Now, as a father, this is something that is absolutely unconscionable to me. I cannot imagine doing this. Now, I've heard from scholars and people that have more letters after their name that I can even remember, and they've told me things like, well, in that day and time, hospitality was exceedingly important and it was a matter of honor, and so that's why he would. That doesn't make me feel any better. And it probably doesn't make you feel any better either. Here was a man that was willing to give up his 2 virgin daughters to this bloodthirsty mob of rapists instead of them taking the 2 strangers that had come under his roof. What must they have been thinking if they heard this? What have they been thinking when their father not only sold them out, but sold out their virginity and was using them as chattel to you go out where these men will be protected. Instead, you're going to be expendable. So they're already having to pay for Lot's decisions. Now they're having to pay for him putting himself in proximity to a place and to people that he should not have been in, and now the consequences are falling on their head. And verse 9, and they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. Who do you think you are? You're Johnny-come-lately. You just moved in here. Yeah, we let you sit here in the winner's circle where we can talk trash and make business deals, but you can't come in here and tell us what to do. You can't come in here and sit in judgment of me and my family and what we have done throughout generations. Who do you think you are? And they threatened to overwhelm him and continue to press him back against the wall. But the men put forth their hand, the 2 men inside, and pulled Lot back into the house and to them and shut the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, that they wearied themselves to find the door. So man, this is just like a movie, isn't it? I mean, this mob is pressing in, and they're gonna bust the door in, and they're gonna take these guys. And right at the last moment, here, I'm gonna have to step. Right at the last moment, when Lot's pressed up against the door, they pull him back in. They pull their arms in there and snatch him to safety. And these men that had come in there smote the rest of these men on the outside with blindness, both small and great. But when they did, they didn't stop. They didn't ask for someone to lead them back home. They were still trying to find the door. They still wanted to get inside. They still wanted to get to their prey that they had come out in the first place for. That's wickedness on an incredible scale. That even when you're struck blind, the only thing that you can think about, not your personal safety, not for the safety of those around you, the only thing that you can think about is your heart's desire and the sin that you had set yourself toward in the first place. See, sin will take you further than you want to go, and it will cost you more than you want to pay. That's that fine print again. The fine print that we didn't take notice of, it's always been there. There's always people around you that will tell you what the cost, the hidden cost is going to be, but we'll ignore it because it doesn't look on the surface anyway that it could possibly be that dangerous, that it could really be that bad. I'll skip to the end for you and tell you it is that bad. It is absolutely horrible, worse than anything you could possibly imagine. There are consequences and there are repercussions that you cannot even conceive of that are down the road for continuing to live in disobedience to God. Not just hell, but in this life. Consequences that you'll never be able to shake from on your own. All because we choose to ignore Him and to disobey Him. And you have to pay for it. And that's bad. But what's worse is that everyone else around you pays. Lot's daughters are going to have to pay with their peace of mind, with their virginity, with their virtue, all because of decisions that Dad had made. The decisions that you make today, your kids, your grandkids, your friends, your family, your spouse, they have to pay for those decisions that you made. And when you've done that, when you have sinned greatly or small within your own eyes, and you've affected the lives of everyone around you, you don't think that there's forgiveness to be had. You don't think that there's ever going to be a brighter tomorrow. But I'm thankful that God doesn't see things the way that I see things. And I don't know you, but I'm glad he doesn't see things the way that you do either. That he sees the end from the beginning, and he looks at things from a much different perspective than you and I would have. When you look back at this story of Lot, what do you think? What do you think of Lot? Would you want him over at your house? Would you want him to live on the same street that you did? Would you want to sit at a dinner table with him? Someone that would do such things? Probably not. But how does God view Lot? How does God see Lot? And what does he think of his character? 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 and 8. And delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked, for that righteous man dwelling among them and seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. God has a better memory than you and I do, but God doesn't remember things the way that you and I do. See, we don't forget and we don't forgive, but when he forgives, he says that he puts those sins, our sins, as far as the east is from the west, and remembers them no more, and doesn't see us the same way that we once were. You might think of yourself that way. The other people in your life, they might still think of you that way, but that's not the way that he sees you. For the believer and those that are his, that have come to him, he doesn't see you as a drug addict, as an alcoholic, as a homosexual, as someone who was transgender, someone that was immoral, someone that was a murderer. For those that have repented toward God and have been made into a new creature, he sees you holy, unblameable, and unreprovable in his sight, irregardless of how you think of yourself, of how other people think of you. He sees you as righteous, even though you're not. He sees you as holy, even though on a good day you're not. He sees you how you are not, but what he has made you into. That's encouraging for me. Even if it's not encouraging for you, it's encouraging for me because I know me, and you know you too. So we've heard of God's mercy, and now let's look at his judgment. Most people know of what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, and I thought that I did too. I've heard it for years. I've read it for years. I've studied it for years. But I found things about Sodom and Gomorrah that, honestly, I would have rather not known. Details that could have stayed in obscurity because they're unsettling. But we can't avoid truth just because it makes us feel uncomfortable. Genesis 19:12, and the men said unto Lot, hast thou any here besides son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast, and bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Get your people and get out. Get your son-in-laws, get your daughters, get everyone. Now you notice he's got son-in-laws, and so that means that they are married to his daughters. The daughters that were previously mentioned, they didn't know any men. So that tells me that he had other daughters. How many? I don't know. Are there people that do know? Maybe. Maybe they're lying to you. I don't know. But I do know that that detail is there for a reason. See, Lot had an entire family. He had an entire life here. He had other lives that were touching his life. They had a whole community that they had built up together that now is at stake, that he's being asked to leave. And he does the same thing many of us would do in the same situation. And Lot went out, and he spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. They mocked. Lot's off his meds again. He's had a little too much to drink, a little too much new wine. They laughed him to scorn and didn't take any sort of stock into what the man was saying. If you live unrighteously and ungodly long enough, your word's not going to mean much either. If you lie, if you fudge the truth just a little bit, then people are not going to trust you, and your word will be worth absolutely nothing to them. And then when the day comes where you have something important, something that's of dire circumstances that's on the horizon, they're not going to pay any attention. There's a story we all grew up hearing as children, Chicken Little. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. And he kept saying it, he kept calling for it, and he kept saying it over and over again. And since nothing ever happened, no one paid any attention to him. He just seems someone that's nuts, someone that's going on, and someone that's trying to entertain themselves. The things that you say matter. The way that you conduct yourself matters. If you hope to reach people, if you hope to be able to carry a message to them of great importance, then your conduct most assuredly matters. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18 says, "For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but to us which are saved it is the power of God." For those that are on the outside and still perishing, the message of the cross is foolish. What could a man dying outside in front of a city 2,000 years ago have any sort of bearing on my life today? What could that possibly offer me? I need therapy. I need a system. I need medication. I need steps and principles to a bigger and better and more prosperous me. That's what I need. What could he have to offer? What could some old book full of Bronze Age fairy tales have that could possibly make a difference in my life? For those that are perishing, it's absolutely foolish. But for those that have been saved and those of us that have been delivered, we know that the message of the cross is the power of God. Now, if you know that and you're trying to carry that message to people that you care about, you try to carry that message to people that you've come across in your day-to-day life, if you have continued to live ungodly and your word doesn't mean anything, friends, they ain't going to hear it. No one wants to hear what you have to say if your character and your conduct is absolutely contrary to that. One of the greatest preachers in the history of the world was Charles Haddon Spurgeon, and he's quoted as saying, "If a man mistreats his wife, don't let him talk to me about Christianity." If someone is going to absolutely defile the one relationship in their life that should be paramount and treat it as though it is worthless and nothing, then I don't care what sort of theological training, what grand truths you have to espouse. And the same is true for me and you. If we neglect the important things, the little things even in our life with those closest to us, then we are unable to reach the world on the outside with whatever message that we have to deliver. Back to Genesis and verse 15. "And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand and upon the hand of his wife and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth and set him without the city." Lot has been told that God is going to destroy the city and everything in it and everyone in it, and he has to be dragged by hand out of the city. Now that sounds absolutely nuts. That sounds crazy. But would you be dragging your feet too? Well, I need my favorite belongings. I should go, Bill down the street. I know he's a friend. We've been friends for years. I need to go say something to him beforehand. Probably, just like any of us would. We don't take seriously the warnings that we are given in life. We don't take seriously the situations that we are in our life. And we treat them as though we've got all the time in the world to do the right thing. But you don't. Time always ends up running out. So Lot, his daughters, and his wife have to be extricated by hand from the city, even in full knowledge of the impending calamity. And so what does Lot do? What does Lot do when he's drug out kicking and screaming from Sodom? He negotiates. He negotiates just a little bit. And this must be a family trait, because Abram did too. When he was given a direct command, he says, okay, well, maybe 50, right? All right, well, okay, if you'll do 50, how about 40? How about 30? We keep going down until we get to the terms that are more acceptable to us. How many of us have tried to negotiate with God? I have. Recently, both hands. Well, God, if you'll just do this, this is what I'll do. If you will just move in this area and this is how you will meet my needs this way, then I promise to do this. But God doesn't say, come on, Adam, let's make a deal. He says, this is the deal. This is who I am, and this is what I've told you to do. And that's true for you too. Terms are not negotiable. So they tell him in 22, haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come hither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. See, originally, the angels had said, look, you need to escape into the mountains. You need to get out of here. And see, this was the negotiation. Lot said, well, I can't do that. We'll die. We're not outdoorsmen. We've been living pampered in the city. I can't possibly go up into the hills. What about that one over there? That's a little city. It looks pretty safe. It's definitely okay. How about if I do that? And what time of the day did this happen? In the morning. See, destruction that comes at night when everyone's asleep, when everything is shut down for the day, that's bad enough. But can you imagine this happening right as the day is getting started? Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground. So as the day began to dawn, and as the people are coming out, the merchants are taking their place, the kids are playing in the street, they see their destruction that is coming upon them, where their lives are immediately cut off and cut short. 2 Thessalonians verse 8 and 9 of chapter 1 says, in flaming fire taking vengeance on them that know not God and that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, who shall be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power. If you have ever said to yourself, why doesn't God do something? Why doesn't God judge sin? Why doesn't God move and take action? He has and he will. And when he does, there is no respite and there is no recourse. When God does take action, it engenders this response in all of us where we look back and we think, oh, how barbaric, how tragic. How could a good, kind, and loving God do such a thing? Because that good, kind, and loving God has repeatedly sent warning for us to stop our disobedience. That good, kind, and loving God has given us every opportunity to return to him until we go past the point of no return where he can tolerate it no longer. Not just because he's got some particular beef with your sin of choice, but because, like a cancer, it's spreading throughout the world and threatens to overtake everyone else around you. So how many people died that day? We don't actually know. But looking at some figures, some scholars estimate that there was 5 cities there, anywhere between 25,000 to even close to 100,000. But they don't know for certain. But either way, that's a lot. That's a lot to suddenly die and to be gone forever. Now, if those numbers shock you, if they cause you to drop your jaw in disbelief, we have 3,000 killed every single day in this country. Over 1 million per year, each and every year. As of today, about 63 million and counting have been killed in the United States alone. Not because of judgment, but for convenience. We have killed our own children because their birth and their life and the responsibility to care for them and to raise them was far too inconvenient. And we would rather do something that throughout history would be appalling to even the most godless heathen on the face of the planet, to murder your own infants. When it gets to that point to where life is so cheap, where it's expendable, when the life of the innocent means absolutely nothing, then we've gone past the point of no return. We've gone past the point of, well, maybe just one more election and some better legislation, and we'll turn this ship around and we will be in the golden age of prosperity again. I don't think so. I don't think so that if we can sit there with the blood of 63 million children on our hands that we have discarded just so we could live the life that we want, if we can do such a thing and sleep at night, I don't think that there is any hope. Now, if you have done that, if you have had an abortion, if you were a doctor that performed those abortions, you know that there is forgiveness for you, but there is no forgetting. You carry the memory forever. Now, I've been told before that since I'm a man, I don't have any right to speak about abortion. And I'm glad that people remember what a man is again, but that's entirely not true. Though I didn't participate in the act of abortion, at one point, and I lived a very immoral and godless lifestyle, a young lady that I was in a relationship with, she was pregnant. And I absolutely did not want her to have that baby. So I begged her. I pleaded with her. I did everything possible to convince her to have an abortion to end the life of that baby so that my future would continue on and unfold just the way that I had planned. I got the money together. I had the appointment made. And before that could take place, she had a miscarriage and she lost the baby. I think about that almost every single day. Because if you in your heart already consent to something, it's just as though you've done it. Jesus said if you looked on a woman with lust, you've committed adultery already with her in your heart. That if you have hatred in your heart towards your brother, that you've already committed murder. And I was ready to do it. I'll never forget that. And you know what? I don't want to. I don't want to forget it. I want to know just where God brought me from. I want to know just what God has delivered me from, just what He has forgiven me from, so I can look at life look at it unimpeded, not through rosy glasses, but through clarity, to see it how it actually is. And that's why when I tell you that there's forgiveness to be had, that God extends His hand of forgiveness to you, I'm not telling you something that I read. And I'm not telling you something that someone told me. I'm telling you something that I've lived and experienced, that it's there for you no matter how far you have fallen or how far you've gone. So what's the aftermath? Now, but his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. Remember, they had one simple command: go that way and don't look back. And one command seemed to be one command too many. And when she looks back, she becomes a pillar of salt. One of the shortest scriptures in the Bible speaks about this very event right here. In Luke 17:32, Jesus says to remember Lot's wife. Why would you need to remember? Because going back, looking back, has consequences. Disobedience has consequences, unintended as they are. Even if it seems to be just a small thing, like looking back, to wave, to reminisce, to think about what it is that you're leaving behind. It could have consequences that, friends, you ain't willing to pay, but you won't have a choice at that point. Remember Lot's wife. Remember it all the days of your life. And Lot, well, he still can't follow directions. He was told, all right, and see, you can see that his wife has the same problem, or at least she did, that, hey, you're supposed to go that way, you're not supposed to look back. Go to the mountains, you can stay there. And he, of course, wouldn't do that. He had to negotiate. He had to go to Zoar because that seemed to be safer. That seemed to be more prosperous. That seemed to be probably more like what he was accustomed to. And that's where he said that he was going to go. In verse 30, and Lot went up out of Zoar, and he dwelt in the mountain. I think the guy's bipolar. He just can't seem to make a decision and stick with it. And his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. Now, what happens here in the next few verses is the stuff of tabloid. If you are over 25 years old, you'll recognize this guy here. That when you say his name, it's become such a cultural phenomenon. You know that you're talking about something that is morally bankrupt. Something that would not even make the pages of fiction decades ago. But it's something that has been commonplace and accepted, no matter how vile it is. So what actually happened is, as Lot and his daughters are in this cave, the daughters reason with themselves and say, look, the world's obviously ended. You can see the smoke rising on the horizon. So what we're going to do is we're going to get Dad drunk, and we'll both take turns laying with Dad, and then we'll have some kids, and we'll be able to repopulate the earth. So the oldest one goes in the first night. She gets pop drunk. She lays down with him. He's so hammered that he doesn't even know that it happened. And so the very next night, the younger daughter does the same thing. A calculated event that both of them have agreed to do, something that I can't even imagine. Stuff that, honestly, if it made Jerry Springer, that he would probably puke just hearing it. Something that you can't even see, because there are no limits to where your sin and your disobedience can take you. All of us have said, well, yes, I know that I've done this, but I would never do this. You don't get to make that choice. If you say, I would never do this, you will find yourself nevering like never before you realize it. There is no limit. There is no limit that sin will not take you to apart from Jesus Christ. You have no control about where you end up. You'll make decisions that would be absolutely incomprehensible to you just a few years prior. So in the firstborn, she bare a son, and she called his name Moab. Now the same is the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son and called his name Benjamin. His name is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. Moab and Ammon were continual enemies of the nation of Israel as long as the nation stood. Untold thousands of people died on both sides because of the hatred that these people groups had toward one another. How did they become such hated and heated enemies? How did they become such competitors for the land and for the resources there? It all started right here. It all started right here with one man being disobedient, doing what he's not supposed to do, training his children to be disobedient as well, and to do what is expedient, and to follow their own dictates and their own desires, and to do what it is that pops into their mind without any thought of any ensuing consequences. It all started right here with 2 women doing the unthinkable and birthing 2 nations that would cause the death of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, I don't know, but it all could have been avoided. So again, knowing this about Lot, this was even worse than what we heard about previously, is it not? How does God view him? And delivered just Lot vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked, for the righteous man dwelling among them, and seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Lot was forgiven. Lot is remembered as just Lot. When you read Hebrews chapter 11, which is the hall of fame of the faith, Lot is spoken of in glowing terms. But there were consequences, and those consequences followed him. Those consequences were felt by everyone else around him, through his family, through his countrymen, and through his descendants. They had to deal with the consequences from Lot's choices. And odds are that you're already dealing with some of those consequences. And if you're not dealing with them yet, then you will be. You will deal with consequences that you don't see how you could ever possibly persevere through. You don't see how things could ever be whole again in your life. How you could ever have any peace, any semblance of serenity. That is the case for every single one of us. But God. The scripture says, but God, who is rich in mercy for his great love wherewith he loved us, even when we were dead in sins, has quickened us up together by grace you're saved, and we've been made to sit together with Christ in heavenly places, in Christ Jesus, that in the ages to come we might show his exceeding mercy toward us in Christ Jesus. See, apart from him, left to ourselves and to our own devices, into our own best thinking, there's nothing but death, there is nothing but destruction, and there is nothing but misery. But God makes possible the impossible. God takes the reprobate, the person of ill repute, the person that has absolutely no worth to anyone else on the outside, and makes you into something beautiful, something whole, something that is his own peculiar treasure, that he makes a place to sit with him in the place of honor. That's the God that we serve. That's the God that loved us. That's the God that died for us to give us things beyond what we could ever possibly imagine. And those are the options that we have: to follow him and have freedom, or to follow ourselves and have destruction and misery. So this isn't a story. This isn't a Hollywood drama. This isn't a bedtime story or a story to beat your neighbor who is a homosexual or transgender over the head with because you want him to know of the impending calamity and judgment for his behavior. It is a record of God's faithfulness. It's a record of God's holiness. It's a record of God's mercy. It's a record that what God has promised, he will also perform. And it's also a record that even in judgment, God is still merciful and is doing all that he can to pull you out. And it's also a promise that if you say, no, thank you, I think I can do better, or hold on just a minute and let me look back, that you'll suffer consequences, and it will be on your own head, not his.